Hey everyone, today we are sewing up the Celeste East West Bag from Oro Rosa Patterns. This is a mid-sized bag featuring 2 handle length options, 3 card slots, an interior zipper pocket, and 2 slip pockets. It's got a large main compartment and measures 13.5 inches wide, 6 inches high, and 4.5 inches deep. I've sewn this up on my domestic sewing machine and it is finished with a drop-in lining. So let's get going. Before we start, it's assumed that you have already cut and interfaced all of your pattern pieces as well as applied your stabilizer as outlined in the written instructions. And now we are going to prep our handle and our strap detail. The first thing that you're going to do is draw a line straight down the center of each of your handles and your strap detail. I have also added a strip of interfacing to my strap handle to one side of that center line, as this vinyl has a little bit of stretch to it and I don't want my handles to stretch over time. Take your double-sided tape and we're going to apply a strip of double-sided tape on either side of the center line on both handles and the strap detail. For the strap detail, you can just put one thicker strip of double-sided tape down the middle, as that one will only have a single fold. Starting in the center and working your way out, we're going to fold the long raw edge in to meet the center line. By working from the center out, I can reduce any twists in my strap and make sure that I am getting a nice even fold all the way along. Make sure that your edges are lined up at the end. When doing a double fold strap with vinyl, I like to leave a small gap in between my raw edges so that when I do the second fold, I don't get bunching up at that outside edge. Do the same thing for the second handle. The strap detail is single fold, so we're just going to fold the raw edges in to meet at the center. I like to use a seam roller just to crease the fold at the side of my strap detail and of my handle. And then I'm going to fold my handles over one more time to fully enclose the raw edge before I sew around the outside. When I sew around my strap, I'm going to be using a seam allowance of 1/8 of an inch, sewing with a longer stitch length. I'm going to use a walking foot so that I don't get twisting in my straps. That will give me a nice even feed. And I'm also going to increase my tension when I am sewing through the handles because it is 4 layers of vinyl plus that interfacing. For the strap detail, I will check my tension to see if it needs to be adjusted, but my regular tension may be sufficient for just the 2 layers. Fold it over again, lining up the folded edges, and then place a clip. Then sew around the outside edge of all 3 of those pieces. Once you've sewn your handles and your strap detail, we can get organized into our packs. Pack 1 is your exterior pieces. Pack 2, your lining card slot pieces. Pack 3 is your lining zippered pocket pieces. Pack 4, your zipper panel pieces. And pack 5 is your handles and your strap detail. Retrieve your pack 1, and if you are installing your purse feet, go ahead and do that first. I have my marks placed from the pattern at 4 3/8 of an inch from the short end and 1 1/4 of an inch from the long end. I am using screw-in purse feet, so I'm going to punch those holes and then install those purse feet. I like to secure my screws using a very small amount of Loctite, being careful not to get any on my material, as the red Loctite does tend to wick through your material. I also like to put a small piece of Decorative Heavy or similar type of stabilizer between my screw and the base of my bag, just to reduce the chance of the screw pulling through my material. Place the stabilizer over the screw. I'm not going to fuse it, so it doesn't matter which way it goes. Poke it through the hole. And then I will screw it on partially by hand first. Tighten it down. And then cover that with some duct tape, being careful not to get any of the tape within my seam allowance. And then I'll repeat that for the other 3 feet. Place one of your main panels right side up on your table with the top side facing away from you, and place your base right sides together, lining up the bottom edge of the panel with one of the long edges of your base, and clip along that edge. We're going to sew the base to the main panel at 3/8 of an inch, backstitching at the beginning and at the end. Trim back the seam allowance on the base panel only to 1/8 of an inch. Then run a strip of double-sided tape within the seam allowance on the lower part of your exterior panel. Then fold the base out over that seam allowance and press it down. Folding the base away from the exterior, keeping the seam allowance under the base panel. Press it down to get a nice fold. And then we're going to top stitch on the base panel at 1/8 of an inch from that fold, sewing through the seam allowance and the exterior panel, not sewing on the main panel. Longer stitch length, and I have increased my tension to account for the greater number of layers. Back stitching at the beginning and sewing straight down this edge. Flip your bag over and repeat that for the second side, making sure that you have the top side coming up away from your base. Clip along the lower edge, then sew that at 3/8 of an inch. Placing an extra clip at the side can help keep that panel nicely smoothed out. And when you're sewing next to your purse feet, lifting the panel a little can help keep these two edges lined up. Just as we did on the first side, we're going to trim the seam allowance on the base panel only, and then fold that out over the main panel using double-sided tape to stick it down. And then we will top stitch at 1/8 of an inch, just on the base panel, sewing through the seam allowance and the bottom of the bag. Then top stitching along this edge on the base at 1/8 of an inch using your longer stitch length. Once that's top stitched, take your scissors and we are going to trim the seam allowance at the corner here where the main panel joins to the base. Be careful not to cut through any of your stitches. We now need to create the envelope style base at the bottom of this bag. Fold your bag so that it is wrong sides together. And we're going to be first lining up the seams where the base joins to the main exterior panel of the bag. I find it is helpful to keep things lined up if I also place clips on this section. Marking the center here can also be helpful, as can placing a staple where that join is. The important thing at this point is that this fold on both sides of your base is lined up. Once you've got those seams lined up, we're going to baste on just the base from the fold to the fold. So on this one, it's just on that dark pink part, sewing through both sides and not sewing at all on this main panel. You want to make sure that your stitches stop at the fold line. And we're just going to baste at 1/8 of an inch. Sewing from that fold. I am going to back stitch even though this is a basting stitch. And if you've placed a staple there, be very careful that you don't hit that with your needle. Sewing up to the fold, but not beyond the fold. Check that your stitches have not gone any further than where the fold is. And repeat on the other side. And just pressing on the main part of your bag here to hold it flat can help keep the edges lined up. Sewing to the fold, not beyond the fold. And I'm going to check that I'm happy with how well lined up my seams are. If you placed a staple at that fold, remove that. Trim your threads. We now need to fold the exterior panels out over the base of the bag. Just going to fold that up over the seam that joins the base to the main panel on both sides. And then you're going to line up the edge. And you want your side seam to be all lined up here. Something that I find helpful is to first baste my base to one of the main panels before I fully sandwich it so that it doesn't slip around. I'm just going to clip my base to one side of my exterior at both ends. And then I'm just going to baste in the side here before I fold up the second panel. Just using a longer stitch length, 1/8 of an inch again, so it's within the seam allowance. It just helps to keep those layers all lined up. Then fold the second side of the exterior over the top, lining up the upper edge, and then clipping all the way down, making sure the side seam is lined up. And I find that placing a clip here at the bottom can help keep everything well positioned. Also, because of the base panel here, it does want to pop up kind of like a boat. And placing the clips there just helps keep everything in position. We're now going to sew each of those side seams at 3/8 of an inch, making sure that the edges are nicely lined up. And we're going to add a couple of extra rows of reinforcing stitches where the base is sewn into the side seam. I am starting at the bottom, and I'm going to backstitch well, and I have my hump jumper here for when I come down off the bulk. Making sure that the sides of my bag are nicely lined up. I will add a couple of back stitches there at the bulk. Take my hump jumper, place it underneath my presser foot as it comes down off that bulk so it doesn't skip any stitches. Back stitch at the top. I'm going to add a couple of extra rows of reinforcing stitches just at this lower section here, just slightly inside the first line of stitches. And then I'll repeat on the other side. Trim back this side seam allowance, leaving the full seam allowance in the top 3/8 of an inch, but trimming all of this part back to 1/8 of an inch. But don't cut through any of your reinforcing stitches. Take your double-sided tape and you're going to run a strip on the upper side of the line that we have drawn on the exterior panel during the prep. Turn your bag out so that the exterior is right sides out. Poke the corners from the inside of the bag and smooth them out to help them take shape. If you have any creases on your exterior from turning it, you can press those now. Remove the backing from the strip of double-sided tape and you're going to fold the upper edge of your bag down to meet the drawn line. Fold it over and press it in place, opening out the side seam and pressing that down well onto that double-sided tape. Once you have pressed it in place, secure it with clips. I recommend using regular plastic clips rather than metal clips so that you're less likely to have marks on your vinyl. And if you have a soft vinyl, place some scraps of material between your clips and your vinyl so that you don't get any marks from the little teeth. I also like to press on that fold with my seam roller to really help it stick to the double-sided tape and create a nice crease. Placing a small amount of double-sided tape just on that top section can also help that side seam to fold out at the top. Once you've clipped around to the upper edge, set the exterior aside and retrieve your pack 2. Retrieve the card slot piece from your pack 2 and working from the back with the bottom side of your print, if you have a directional print, to your left, you're going to draw a line that is 3.5 inches up from the short end, and then a second line that is 2 3/4 of an inch from the first line. We need to make 2 folds to form our card slots. The first fold will be this way, and the second fold will be this way. It's sometimes tricky to get a fold exactly on the line when you cannot see the line. So what I like to do is put a very small snip, only about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, right where that line is. And then when I fold it, I can line up the edges and then crease. And then the line should be just about where I want it. Go ahead and press that fold. Then we need to make the second fold. This fold, we will be able to see the line, but I still find it's helpful to just put the tiny snip there. Fold that over, line up the sides, and then press along the crease. Iron that one also. So we now have 2 folds, the first here and the second here. And now we need to fold the top part of our card slot piece behind those folds to meet up with the bottom edge. And then press that crease also. Top stitch along the upper edge of this fold at 1/8 of an inch and fold out the bottom fold and top stitch along this edge at 1/8 of an inch also. Those 2 lines top stitched, check that you have not accidentally sewn through the rest of the card slot piece. And take a ruler and a removable pen and draw a line that is 2 3/4 of an inch from the outside edge just on the lower fold and 2 3/4 of an inch from that line also. Which should be the same distance from the other side of your pocket. Then open out the back of your card slot piece to keep this part out of the way and sew on this line, backstitching at the beginning and the end, just on this lower flap piece. So we've already top stitched along this folded edge and then folded it out and top stitched along this folded edge. And now we need to sew on these lines. We are sewing them just to the lower part of the card slot section. So move the back piece up out of the way, and we're sewing from the fold here down to the bottom. Make sure that your card slot piece underneath is nice and smooth. Pull those top threads through to the back or poke them through with a needle. Then fold this upper edge around, right sides together with the card slots. Clip along the lower edge and sew at 3/8 of an inch, backstitching at the beginning and at the end. trim back that seam allowance. I choose not to trim through where the stitching is at the end of my card slot, but that's up to you. Then turn that out through the open end. Smooth out that lower seam. You can use a point turner or a chopstick to help it sit nice and flat. And then I like to give that a press with my iron also. Take your card slot backing piece and you're going to position your card slots 2 1/4 inches up from the lower edge. And then we'll sew around the side, bottom, and other side, securing the 3 outside edges, leaving the top open as a slip pocket. Take your card slot piece and your 2 side pieces, and you're going to place the sides, right sides together with the center card slot piece, and clip those in place. You want the cutout to be at the bottom of the card slots. We're then going to sew those at 3/8 of an inch, backstitching at the beginning and at the end, sewing both the left and the right side piece. Trim the seam allowance of those side pieces, not trimming the center piece or the card slots. Then fold the side panels out away from the center panel. Press those. We're then going to top stitch on the side panel 1/8 of an inch from that fold, sewing through the panel, sewing through the side panel, and the seam allowance of the center card slot piece. Top stitching down this edge and this edge, using a longer stitch length at 1/8 of an inch. Trim back the seam allowance at those 4 corners. Then set that piece aside and retrieve your pack 3. Working now with pack 3, take your zipper pocket lining and your zipper. The first thing that we're going to do is just take a look at our zipper and make a mark on the side that has the tooth further out, so that when we are putting our zipper back together, we can make sure we get the teeth lined up properly. You can make a mark with a pen or by putting a small snip. Then lay your zipper down on your zipper pocket lining piece. The pocket piece is ever so slightly wider than it is tall. Center it up, and then using double-sided tape or clips, secure it to the upper edge of that zipper pocket lining, and then we're going to baste that at 1/8 of an inch. You want to make sure that the zipper tape and the pocket lining are centered so there's equal distance on either end. baste along the upper edge at 1/8 of an inch. Basting your zipper tape wrong sides down on the right side of your lining piece. Take your zipper pocket backing and you're going to lay it face down on your zipper tape. You have the zipper pocket lining face up, the back of the zipper tape on the zipper pocket lining, and then the zipper tape face up. Place your zipper pocket backing right sides down. If you have a directional print, then you want the bottom of your print to be at the top. Using clips or double-sided tape, secure that to the zipper tape. They should be the same length. If not, make sure it's centered. And we're going to sew from one end all the way to the other at 3/8 of an inch, sewing through the zipper pocket backing, the zipper tape itself, and the zipper pocket lining. When you've sewn that seam, take your zipper pocket backing and fold it up and away from that zipper tape and press along that fold. You're then going to tuck the zipper pocket backing behind the zipper pocket lining and the zipper tape, wrapping that seam allowance, and press a fold at the top. So now we have a zipper tape, the right side of our zipper pocket lining, and our zipper pocket backing wrapped around the zipper tape seam allowance, and it is now wrong sides together with the zipper pocket lining. And we're going to top stitch this upper section with 2 rows of top stitching. One that is 1/8 of an inch from this fold where the zipper is, and one that is 1/8 of an inch from the upper fold. You can do that as 2 separate lines of stitching, or you can create a rectangle that goes all the way around. Sewing through the zipper pocket backing, the zipper tape, and the seam allowance here, as well as the zipper pocket backing behind the zipper pocket. We now need to baste the second side of our zipper to the second side of our zipper pocket lining. You can do that by opening out your zipper tape and centering it up on the lower edge, or you can fold this panel out of the way and then center up your zipper tape from the other side and clip or use double-sided tape to keep that in place. Line up the edges of your zipper pocket so that you know you have got your tape in the correct position, and make sure that it is centered up. And then baste along this edge, sewing through the zipper tape and the zipper pocket lining, making sure that the rest of your zipper pocket pieces are well out of the way. The reason I am doing it this way is because it is sometimes hard to get the zipper to line back up and keep your edges nice and flush. So if you sew this row of basting stitches before you separate your zipper, it can help keep everything correctly positioned. With that second side of the zipper basted to the zipper pocket lining, open out your zipper tape and take your zipper pocket front, and you're going to place it right sides down on that zipper tape. The final finished position will be like this. So when you are placing it on that tape, you want it right sides down, and if it's directional, the direction is going to point up, and you're sandwiching that zipper between the zipper pocket lining and your zipper pocket front piece, right sides together. And you're going to be sewing through the zipper pocket front that will be seen on the inside of your bag, your zipper tape that is right sides together with your zipper pocket front, and then your lining Sewing along here from one side to the other, starting at the edge of the zipper tape, sewing all the way along at 3/8 of an inch, back stitching at the beginning and at the end. Fold the zipper pocket front out and away from the zipper tape. And also press the lining away from the zipper tape so that it is wrong sides together with the zipper pocket front. We're then going to top stitch below the zipper tape on the exterior piece, sewing through the exterior, the seam allowance, the zipper tape, and also through the lining. Sewing at 1/8 of an inch along this edge. With that top stitching done, we need to close up our zipper. Taking a look at your zipper tape to remind yourself which end you marked as being the tooth that needs to be furthest out. Place your zipper pull and close the tape all the way. And when you're sliding it on, make sure that the side that we marked earlier as being the starting zipper tooth remains in that first position so that we know we have got our zipper tape lined back up correctly. I like to slide my pull on that side first, pull the tape partially into the zipper head until it is just shy of the end. Take the other side and slide it up. And when I feel the meat, I will pull the first side down and push the zipper head from the back, making sure that there are no gaps in my zipper teeth. Nope. Try again. It's important to get it lined back up correctly so that your zipper pocket sides are lined up. One of my zipper teeth is just a little wonky. This first tooth here is just a little wonky, so I'm actually going to cut that off. And so instead of starting on the side that I marked, I'm going to start on the other side. Because since I cut that first tooth off, now the lower side will be the first tooth. Slide it all the way on, all the way off, and then slide it back to the middle. Making sure that I've got the correct tooth alignment so that I have a nice smooth zipper with no bubbles. Smooth that zipper pocket out. You can press it with an iron and then flip both the zipper pocket exterior and the zipper pocket backing up out of the way, and we need to sew the sides of this zipper pocket closed. When we're sewing, we're going to make sure that we are not sewing past where this fold is, sewing down this end and this end at 3/8 of an inch, back stitching at the beginning and at the end, and then we will trim back that seam allowance. You want to be careful that you don't sew beyond the seam allowance here, as any stitches that go beyond that will be catching the exterior of your zipper pocket. So sewing down here and down here. Trim the seam allowance at the side of that zipper pocket. Retrieve your side panels, and we now need to fold up our slip pocket. Fold the zipper pocket backing up behind your zipper pocket, and you want to match the height of the center section to your side panels. So lay them next to each other and line up the bottom of your zipper pocket front and the top of your zipper pocket backing to work out where to make the crease in your slip pocket. You want to make sure that it is parallel to the upper edge of your pocket. And there should be about an inch at the top here. The main consideration is that it is the same height as your side pieces and that it is straight. Press that fold. And if you wish, you can baste the side of that slip pocket to keep it in position. I also like to double check that my zipper pull is on, and then place your side panels right sides together with your center panel. Clip along the outside edge, and then we're going to sew that at 3/8 of an inch, the same way as we did for the card slot center panel. Doing the same for both sides. Sewing down here and down here at 3/8 of an inch, backstitching well at the beginning and at the end. Again, making sure that the cutout is at the bottom of your lining piece. Trim back the seam allowance on those side panels. Then fold the panels away from the center. Press those and then top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the fold. Sewing through the side panel and the seam allowance where the side panel attaches to the zipper panel. Top stitching here and here. Trim the seam allowance at the 4 corners the same way as we did for the card slot lining panel. Then set that aside and grab your pack 4. Working first with your zipper panels, place double-sided tape at each of the short ends on both panels. Remove the backing and then wrap the end of your zipper panel around your stabilizer. Your zipper panels should be the same length. Take your zipper tape and cinch the ends. And so that we can make sure that our zipper stays aligned, I'm going to mark which end the tooth is further out, the same way as we did for our zipper pocket. So when I'm putting my pull back on, I know to start on this side to make sure that this tooth is still further out when I put my zipper tape back together so that my sides line up. We need to turn the other end out 90 degrees. Separate your zipper and pinch the end about 1/2 inch from the raw end. Fold it around to create a 90-degree turn, and a fold on the back of your zipper of about 45 degrees. I like to place a clip to hold that in place. And then you can hand sew this to keep it in position, or you can melt it. Press that down onto the back of the tape to hold that 90-degree turn. Fold the other side at the same level, pinching it over, and then folding out the teeth to create that 90-degree turn. And again, clip it in place and then melt the raw end and press it down to secure that 90-degree turn. Separate that zipper tape fully. and fold each of your zipper panels in half, right sides together. Lining up the folded edges, I like to mark the center with a little snip within the seam allowance. Then I will run double-sided tape along one edge on the right side of my zipper panel. You're going to place your zipper tape right sides down with the teeth pointing towards the center of your zipper panel, because when we turn it out and top stitch, the teeth will point back towards the middle. Working with one side at a time, remove the backing from your double-sided tape and position your zipper so that the teeth, where they are folded out 90 degrees, come up just shy of that center mark. And press that down, lining up the outside edge of your zipper tape with the edge of your zipper panel. All the way to the fold. Then fold the other side around that zipper tape and tuck the teeth up into that center mark. And press the underside of the zipper panel to the underside of your zipper tape. Do the same for the other side, making sure that it is mirrored. So zipper teeth, right sides down on your zipper panel, the fold of the teeth right up near that center mark, and press it along. And then fold the other end around, sandwiching that zipper tape in between. Before we sew it, we need to double check that we have our zippers facing opposite ways. So we have open edge of our zipper panel and then zipper teeth facing towards the middle. So we are ready to sew that. We're going to sew along this edge, sewing through both sides of the zipper panel and the zipper tape, taking care at the end where the bulk is, backstitching at the beginning and at the end. And I'm going to start and stop a little further away from where this fold is to hide my tails better. We're going to sew each of these at 3/8 of an inch along this edge. It can be a little easier to start at the end where the fold is. Trim back the seam allowance, making sure that you are not cutting into your zipper tape, and also clip your corners at the ends here to reduce bulk. Turn your zipper panel out and poke out the corner where the zipper teeth are and smooth the seam, pulling your vinyl away from the zipper teeth so that you get a nice neat fold for top stitching. If you have excess bulk around your zipper, you can use key fob pliers or a mallet just to flatten that out a little. Use clips to help keep your position. And we will then top stitch around these 3 sides of our zipper panel using a longer stitch length at 1/8 of an inch, leaving this side of the zipper panel open. You can use a point turner or a chopstick to encourage that fold at the stitch line. Repeat for the second zipper panel. Double check that your zipper panels are mirrored and then set those aside. Take your top trim lining pieces and you're going to draw a line that is 1 inch down from the top edge. My piece is non-directional, so it doesn't matter which way I do this, but if you have a directional print, then you want the 1 inch to be at the top. Run a strip of double-sided tape along the uppermost edge of those 2 pieces. Retrieve your 2 completed lining panels. You're going to mark the center top on each of those, as well as the center of your zipper panels and the center bottom of the lining trim. The center of your panel is the center of your vinyl, not the center of your zipper tape. Take one of your lining pieces and match up the center marking on the zipper panel with the center marking on your lining piece. You can choose whether you want the zipper pocket or the card slots to be on the front or the back and which way you want your zipper to close. Make sure that your zipper teeth are facing up so the back of the zipper teeth is down on that lining panel. Face the zipper panel to the lining panel at 1/8 of an inch. Take one of your lining trim pieces and place it right sides down on your lining panel, making sure that the edge with the double-sided tape is facing towards the bottom of your bag and the lower edge where we marked our center is lining up with the upper edge of our main lining panel. Clip that in place and then we will sew it to the main lining panel at 3/8 of an inch. Trim back the seam allowance of the lining and the zipper panel, leaving the lining trim piece at the top there intact. Fold the trim at the top up and away from the main part of your lining and crease the lower part of your lining away from the zipper panel and the upper trim. We're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch from the fold on the lower part of the lining. Sewing all the way from one end to the other, and we will be sewing through the lining and the seam allowance of the upper trim, making sure that our zipper panel is pointing up towards the opening of the bag. Trim the seam allowance at the edge of that upper lining trim to reduce the bulk at the side seam. Repeat those steps for the second lining panel, making sure that your zipper is facing the other direction, again with the wrong side of the zipper down on the main lining panel. Take your two completed lining panels and double check that your zippers are mirrored and that when you have your lining facing up on your work surface, you can see the back of your zipper tape. When you're confident that you've got that placement correct, you can sew these two panels together. The first step is to sew the bottom seam. Clip your two lining panels together along the bottom seam, which is where we have the cutouts, lining up the folds at the side of the center panel. Clip all the way along, right sides together. Sew along this bottom seam at 3/8 of an inch, backstitching well at the beginning and at the end. You'll know you have the correct seam allowance because your line should start and finish around the area that the straight part angles away. Butterfly those seams and press them open so that they sit flat against the main part of your bag lining, and then top stitch at 1/8 of an inch on either side of that joining seam. Before we sew the side seams, we're going to draw in our seam allowances at the corner here to make sure that we get an exact fit when boxing these interior corners. Take your ruler and you're just going to draw a line 3/8 of an inch from this angled cutout and 3/8 of an inch from the side of the bag. And where these two lines meet is where you're going to pivot your stitch. Draw in those lines on each of the four corners. Take your clips and fold your zipper panel over on itself and clip it in the center to keep it out of the way while we sew our side seams. Fold your lining right sides together and clip along the outside edge of the side panels, lining up the seam where the main part of the lining meets with the trim. Sew the side seams at 3/8 of an inch, backstitching at the beginning and stopping where the two lines that we drew cross over and backstitching again. We now need to sew up the lining corner of this bag. Fold open the corner and you're going to be matching up the straight edge at the end of your bottom seam with the side seam where we have just sewn. Match up the center of the seam with the center of your bottom seam. And then working one side at a time, you need to fold the corner out. Make sure that the point where we have backstitched is meeting up with the center of that bottom seam. Smooth your bag out, and you should have a flat area here where it meets up nicely at the fold without any overhang. Place clips along that edge. Do the same on the other side. Making sure that this part here folds up nicely and that you don't have any overhang like this at the corner. It should be nice and even. I clip from the fold towards the center. Make sure that it is nicely lined up, and it should look like this when it's clipped in place. When we sew this corner, we're going to sew it in two parts. We are going to start at the fold and sew towards the center, and then we're going to flip it over and sew from the fold on the other side towards the center, so that we will have a line of stitches that ends here, meeting up with our pivot point where we have backstitched the sides. You're going to do the same for each of the corners. We will sew 4 seams, backstitching at the beginning and backstitching when we meet up with this side seam here. Sewing at 3/8 of an inch and keeping the side we are not working on pulled out of the way. Sewing up to where the join is in that bottom seam, backstitching, then flipping it over and sewing from the fold to the center again. Again, pulling the side that we're not working on out of the way so that we don't accidentally catch it in our row of stitches. Check to make sure your stitches have made it all the way up. On this side, it hasn't quite made it, so I'm going to sew it from the side seam now, again keeping the other part out of the way, just sewing that a little bit at the top there to make sure that there are no gaps in that inside corner of my finished bag. Check that it's all joined up and closed up. Check it from the inside. And then repeat those steps for the other corner. Trim back the seam allowance at the corners and of the side seam, leaving a section at the top of about 3/8 of an inch. Remove the backing from the double-sided tape that we placed earlier. Fold open the side seams and then fold down the upper edge to meet the line that we have drawn on our top trim piece. You can add a little bit of extra double-sided tape over that folded out seam so that it will stick down at the side. Press the fold with a seam roller to help form that crease. Then take some wider double-sided tape, -3/8 of an inch, and run it over the raw edge of that fold. It's half on my trim here and half on the back. This is to help keep that fold in position, and we will also use it when we place the lining inside of the exterior. Without it getting in the way of our top stitching. Retrieve your exterior, and we're going to place our lining inside. If you have a preference as to which way your lining faces in comparison to your exterior, make sure that you position it correctly now. Mine is the same on either side, so it doesn't matter. I like to check the fit before I remove my double-sided tape. I'm just going to place a clip at the side seam where the side seam of the lining meets up with the side seam of my exterior. And when you're happy with the fit, remove the backing from this double-sided tape and press the interior to your exterior, lining up the upper folded edges. It can be helpful to note where the center is and work your way out so you have an extra landmark in addition to your side seams when you're matching your lining to your exterior. When you're happy with your positioning, we need to top stitch around the entire opening at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to be sewing on a domestic machine, so the section here where the side seam of the lining meets the side seam of the exterior may be a little tricky, so I'm going to compress that first with my key fob pliers, and I'll have my hump jumper and just take it nice and slowly as I approach that bulkier area when I am sewing around. I've taken the bed off my sewing machine. I'm going to be sewing with the exterior facing out, starting just beyond where that bulky side seam is. And make sure that you keep your zipper panel folded back out of the way. Starting with long tails, not back stitching. I'm doing my best to keep the fold of the exterior and the fold of the lining nicely matched up. I've also got my hump jumper handy, and I'm just going to take it nice and slowly. Increasing my tension with the increased number of layers. Tuck this panel under also so I don't accidentally sew through it. Something that's key to getting an even top stitch when you're sewing around the opening of a bag like this is that your feed is even. Sometimes things like the zipper panel or part of the exterior of your bag get caught on your machine as you're trying to feed it through, and it causes it to have uneven stitches. Even things like the space behind your machine can affect the quality of your top stitch. It's just missing those stitches as it's coming down off the book. I'm just going to put my hump jumper underneath there. That should help with that. Let me back up with where we started. I'm going to pull those tails through and tuck them between the folds here. If you can open out the fold and just identify where those threads are and just gently pull them in between the folds, then you can tie your knot between the folds and then the join will be well disguised. And then this last thread here, I'm going to just poke through that needle hole into the center there so that I don't have any gaps in my stitches. Then I can bundle those 4 threads, tie a knot, and tuck it between the layers. When you're happy with your top stitching, grab a ruler and measure and mark the rivet placement for your handles. You're measuring 5 inches in from the side seam and 1 1/4 of an inch down from the folded edge, and make a mark. Repeat that for both sides of the front and the back for 4 total marks. I find it's most accurate if I measure from the side seam, kind of flattening it out first, line up the correct line on my ruler with the upper edge of my exterior, check it about 20 times, and then place the mark. We now need to punch those holes. I like to first use my stiletto to mark that, to make sure that the placement on the inside is correct. These holes are going through our exterior and through our lining below the level of the zipper panel. So I like to just poke first through the lining to check that I am happy with how that looks, that I'm not poking through anything that I shouldn't be. Make sure that your lining is smoothed out on the inside. And then I will punch the full-sized hole with my screw punch. Set your bag aside and retrieve your pack 5. Working first with your handles, we are going to mark, measure, and punch a hole centered in our strap 1 inch from the short end in 1, 2, 3, 4 total positions. Install your strap ends at both ends of each handle. I've changed the way that I install my screw-in strap ends, so I'm going to show you how I have been doing it. You'll need an awl or a stiletto. You'll need some Loctite and a pin. Take your strap, and the first thing that you want to do is make sure that the edge of your strap is nice and straight. So I'm just going to straighten that up a little. Take your strap hardware and place it so that the back of your strap is facing the back of your strap end, and hold it in place without the screws. Take your awl or your stiletto and poke it through that hole to make a mark. And then using your awl, poke that hole all the way through your strap, making sure you're not going through your top stitching lines. What I then like to do is take my strap end, and I'm just going to partially screw in the screws when it is not on my strap and before I apply any of my Loctite, and that allows me to screw it in much more easily than when I try to screw it in when it is in place. I like these little tiny twisty screwdrivers. When those screws are just partially coming through, I'm going to take a pin, and I've just put a drip of Loctite here on this plastic so it doesn't wick. And I'm just going to put a couple of teeny little drops on the threads of that screw around the opening. Then I'm going to place my strap end over the end of the strap. Those holes that we made will line up with where those screws are. And then I can easily screw it down into my strap. And then the screws will go through the holes that I made with the awl rather than just pinching my vinyl to the other side of my strap end. It gives you a lot more secure install of those strap ends. Set your handles aside and grab your strap detail and a ruler. The first thing we need to do is mark the center of our strap. You're going to mark that with a removable pen. Take your ruler and you're going to measure 2 1/4 inches from the center mark and make a mark in the center of your strap, but you are not yet going to punch that hole. Place the mark the same distance from the center to the other side. Again, centered in your strap detail. You're also going to make a mark that is 10 inches from these center marks towards the end of your strap. Again, not punching the holes yet, just making those marks. Remove the center marking, and you should have 4 marks on your detail piece. 2 in the center that are 2 1/4 inches from where that center mark was, and then 2 on the outside that are 10 inches from that first mark on their respective sides. So 2 1/4 from the center, and then 10 inches from that center mark towards the outside edge. Take your bag exterior And on the back of that bag, compare these center marks with the holes that we made on our bag exterior. Make sure that they line up. When you're happy that they are lining up, punch these centermost holes in your strap detail. Take one of your handles and 2 sets of rivets, and you're going to place the stud portion through the holes we made at the end of the strap. Making sure that your handle is positioned the way that you want it. You can have the folded part facing out or facing in. Place the stud portion through the holes that we just made in our strap detail. You're then going to place the stud through the hole in the bag exterior. Place your cap. Do the same for the other rivet. Set both of those rivets in place. Flip your bag over and compare the other marks to the holes that we have punched in our exterior. You want your strap detail to be snug around the side of your bag, and adjust those if necessary. When you're happy that the marks are in the correct position, punch those holes. Retrieve 2 sets of rivets in your other handle, and you're going to place the studs through the handle rivet holes, the same as the first side. Wrap your strap detail around your bag, then place the rivet through the hole in the strap detail and your exterior. Put the cap on and set those rivets. You want to make sure that there are no twists in your strap detail and that your handle is facing the way you want it to. Then you can set those rivets. Retrieve your chosen detail piece and 2 more sets of rivets, and we need to check our positioning. I'm going to use an O-ring. I'm going to do a dry fit with the strap going the other way first. And I like to position the detail between my handles. Could use a ruler to help you center that up. Then fold the strap detail around to get your positioning, making sure it's nice and taut. Mine is going backwards right now so that I can make sure that it's positioned correctly. I'm then going to punch holes that are 5/8 of an inch from the edge of my hardware. And then I will tuck the strap detail back around underneath and secure the rivets. Want to mark it first? Then I can wrap it the other way. If your strap detail is too long, then you can just trim the end of that. I'm going to check my positioning on both sides first. I'm happy with that positioning, so I'm just going to trim a little bit of the strap detail here, and then I'm going to put a little bit of fray check just over my top stitching so that it does not come undone. I'm then going to set those rivets. What I'm actually going to do rather than put the free check on is just take a little piece of double-sided tape and I'm going to put it over the stitches in that strap detail to secure those, and then I'm going to use the double-sided tape to stick it to the back of the strap detail underneath here so that it doesn't pop out at all. And that'll keep it nicely lined up. The last thing we need to do is install our zipper and our zipper end. So looking at your zipper tape and starting on the side that we marked earlier, slide your pull on. When you get that pull on, note which tooth is sticking further out, and if it is the side you marked, then you know your zipper panel will be nicely lined up. We now need to fold over our zipper tape. I'm going to use some double-sided tape to keep that folded to the center. Slide on my zipper end. And then I will screw that in place. And then you're all finished. Hope that helps. Thanks, everyone.